I went in some 30 years. In fact, it was 30 years ago, as a bonehead civilian, uh, going to go talk to some combat vets, combat Marines on Iwo Jima, right? And so I've got my questions, and found that just really. Later on, I realized I was just a boot, asking dumb questions, and what still sticks with me was the, shall I say, grace with which and patience with which they accepted me and sort of brought me up, yeah, if you might say. And I guarantee you, some of them did the same during the war. But that a lot of those preconceptions and maybe the John Wayneisms and that kind of stuff just weren't reality, especially for Iwo Jima. And then eventually, and I was doing corporate training at the time, and I realized, hang on a second, we're not discovering anything new. These guys already know this stuff. They've already lived it. They just don't, they're not articulators of it, for the training and leadership stuff. All those things surprise me. And so, you go in, I'm thinking in terms of what little I know that I've read in books and X's and O's. And if you pay attention, you find out it's very different in reality. And it's about the people and about the team itself and that organism that we call a Fox Company, et cetera. And that's a whole different entity in this different discussion. So those things came as a big surprise to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just flashed me back to a segment with Tim Gray. You're talking about how it kind of surprised these guys to open up and tell stories. And he made a comment that it kind of made me think about something, how, and I know you've ran into this because you talked about it in Fredericksburg last February when we were there for the Iwo Jima conference memorial anniversary. And it's how a lot of combat vets, they don't even tell these stories to their family, but someone like you, someone like Tim, who comes with the questions, you're able to get these stories. Was that something that, I mean, you kind of already alluded to, it surprised you, but did it, what are your thoughts even on that? Like, for you to be, because once you learned that you were able to get the stories that their families didn't.
In the very first reunion that I was at in North Charleston, and I remember very clearly in that, I think the first day, sitting in the hospitality room, and a fellow named Don Swindle sitting on my right, going at it. And on my left, I remember a little fellow named Eddie Davis going at it. And I didn't know particularly, and I found out, you better be light on your feet and know what they're talking about. Because when you're going to be on the beach, and then you're going to be on the cliffs on Saipan, and then you're going to be, it's like that at the road there on Tinian. And then, like, whoa, you gotta be able to hang with them. Or at least pretend you know what they're talking about and look it up later,
Right.
But
that's how we do these podcasts.
Yeah. And I don't know if I was recording that conversation. Fortunately, from the start, I always carried a little micro cassette recorder with me. And I would have that because I was not really doing interviews. I started out asking questions, just getting to know the guys and stuff. But later it became recording team conversations as they happened and just having those. But I always had that with me. But I'm sitting at the table and they're going to town. And then Eddie Davis, who had been the company runner, the field music, at one point he goes, "I got to go to the head." And he gets up and he leaves the table. And I look on the other side of him is his wife, Barb, looking across at me like, I've been married to him 30 years. I've never heard any of that before. Yeah. I didn't know what to say to that, but it's just reality. A lot of it has to do with, there's a lot of layers to it about, and if that's a topic we will talk about, let's take a minute or two with that.
Sure.
These guys during World War II, over 16 million Americans alive. 16 million out of 160 million in the 1940 census. So 1 out of 10 people alive, whether you're a toddler or great grandfather, 1 out of 10 of you served in uniform.
Yeah.
And the great majority, thankfully, came home, but everybody else served. They don't need to hear from me. I'm going to get to work like they are. And so when Gunny Douglas said, I had a friend for 30 years and he never knew I was on Iwo Jima, we never talked about it until it came up one day. And I was at his house. We went to family lunches with him and dinners after church and everything else. And something about Iwo was said. And then he said, I was on Iwo Jima. And the guy said, well, I didn't know that. And he said, we just didn't talk about it. And it wasn't, a lot of it was, that's over with. And by golly, I don't want to mess with that ever again. Don't want to hear it. And there was a lot of that. There's a lot of everybody else did it. They don't need to hear from me. And there's a lot of mom, you don't really want to know, don't ask.
Yeah.
Or the wife, they didn't want to know. And if the kids didn't know what to ask, nobody does, right? You go up to a combat veteran, what do you say? And folks just didn't know this. So there are a lot of layers to it. But when you get to the point of, can you establish a shared understanding? Or, when they get back together, they already have that implicit understanding. They don't need to lay all the groundwork and fight all the fights, and they can just get in and talk.
Yeah.
And if you can achieve some of that, some insight. I remember being at one of the division reunions, 4th Marine Division reunions, and the banquet, they would split everybody up and assign you seats at various tables with folks you didn't know, which was a great thing. So I sat there and kept my mouth shut for a while until this fellow on my left said something about being in the JASCO. I said, were you naval gunfire or air ground liaison? You know about JASCOs? Sure. No, we were air ground. I said, did you carry a TCX, a TBX on the Jeep, or had you guys relay with the SCR-3? Boom, off we went, Or a corpsman. There was a corpsman in Hawaii in September. And some guys standing around, young fellows who really wanted to think of something to say, to go talk to him. I said, come on. And I went up and I said, blah, blah, blah. He was I said, you were a line corpsman. He goes, that's right. And we talked about it. I said, now, who was your battalion surgeon? My battalion surgeon. Well, and he tapped me and off he went. And so one of the things that always gets asked of me when we're doing our leadership programs, a colleague, co-instructor will say, listen, if all of you have family members who served whenever they served, and they generally don't talk about it. Talk to Steve if you want to get any insights. Well, what insights could I give them? Except don't ask them about themselves. Ask them about their leaders or their teammates. And then have pen and paper ready to go. And you're off. They don't want to talk about themselves, but they will talk about the folks they love or hated.
Yeah, that's don't ask them, right? I don't know if we need to say this, but yeah, like don't ask them the stupid,
oh, how many people did you kill during the war?
Yeah.
I saw this happen on the Band of Brothers tour one time, and I just wanted to puke. It was unbelievable, but yeah.
I tell people the best, people will reach out sometimes and ask questions. Like if we touched on mental health or sobriety, or I actually had a guy text me the other night about wanting to quit. I stayed up talking with him. Well, it's a story for another time, but one of the questions someone asked me was like, how do you ever deal with that question if you ever killed anybody? And for me, I thought about it for a while, and for me, it's no matter what the answer to that question is, it'll forever change your opinion of that person.
Yeah.
And so something that powerful, that personal, sometimes those things just don't need to be asked. And if they are asked, they don't need to be answered. But you pointed out something else, like really, really huge that kind of hit me. And this is why these conversations are so important, is because it gets me thinking about things. And you're talking about how guys could know each other, have served on the same island, the same battlefield, been on the same ship. In some cases, the same battalion, right? You got 1,000 people in the battalion. I didn't know all the guys in Kilo, India, weapons. And back then, we didn't have all the damn hats and grunt style t-shirts and things. Because when you were talking about these guys were like, oh, you were on Iwo Jima? It made me think about, I was wearing of course, a Ton Tavern Marine Corps shirt. And some guy notices that he comes up and talks with me. We were in the same fight together, Operation Steel Curtain, and Husayba in Iraq. We were in combat together, and yeah, a lot of those conversations, you got me thinking about how that stuff didn't come up because if they didn't have anything or nobody said anything, or, and that today we have like everybody has the tattoos, right?
Right.
We have all the dead
Signs,
giveaways
carrying the signs around.
yeah.
Yeah.
We have all the dead giveaways that we served, in a theater or served in period. But yeah, back then, like you said, they came home. They didn't really want to talk about it, and there was no visible, recognition of somebody else that they could talk to.
Yes. And in my own observation, put it that way, even within, let's say, just say the 4th Marine Division, I'm going to assert that the first ones who got together were probably the motor transport and artillery guys and et cetera. And I think that's accurate. Your guys up there with the pointy weapons took a little longer to get back together. That's my read on it. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I am. And it's not because one was better than the other or anything else. But there were some things that were buried and buried deep, and they didn't talk about it literally for 40 years until somebody reached out to them and said, "Hey, we're getting together," and they just decided it was time. And these guys from Fox Company knew, for example, that division reunions started happening in the 40s. They didn't want anything to do with it. But then all of a sudden they decided, you know what? Irby decided, I want to see Ralph. Where's Ralph? And they started going to libraries back in those days and getting phone books and looking up people and trying to find phone numbers, which was a lot of work. And they did a lot of work to find each other. And Irby Hip, Corporal Irby Hip, who was a machine gun section leader, lived in South Carolina. His wife, Liddy, was just as good as it gets. I mean, she was just phenomenal. But she told me, the first year when they got together, they didn't talk about the war. They just got together. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And I think therein lay a lesson that has value in many ways, including, you mentioned a fellow who felt like he wanted to quit. And I was at a watering hole a few years back, a favorite of mine, and late afternoon, probably 4 o'clock, something like that, and talking to this fellow on my left, and I don't know what was said, something about going to the head, or it's good to go, or whatever it was, something that tipped him off, and off we went. And the more beers we had, the more came out, and he viewed himself as a murderer because he'd been a sentry, and a truck came through. It was through the barriers, and he'd fired warning shots, and then finally they killed this fellow. And later they find out he was just going to pick up his daughter. And, well, what are you going to do if you're me? I said, I'm a nobody, but I'm going to tell you something. I've been around combat veterans for half my life, and you need to find your buddies, because you don't carry that around with you, because that is an ugly job with terrible outcomes, and that's just the way it is. But you don't carry that alone. Now that I can tell you. So these guys got together to be together, and that was the value of it. And first and foremost, as a Marine, the most important people in the world are your fellow Marines when you're out in the battlefield. And then you come home and they're not there.
Yeah.
What's going to fill that void? There's nothing that can.
Nothing does, man.
No. And so you have got to absolutely get back together and just so there's a level of understanding, shared understanding, doesn't even need to be talked about. You know that when you're with your best buddy and you just go sit in the dirt for a while, that's good to go. You don't need to say a word.
We had, and you said 40 years. I was going to ask how long till a lot of the grunts got back together. We had our first, it was about 20 years after the fact. And to just echo exactly what you're saying, when we got together, I don't really remember if we did talk about things that happened over there. It was more like the humorous, funny things.
Right.
We did take, because it was a reunion done through Semper Fi, America's Fun, and we did have moments where we remembered the guys that we lost. We took time for that, but like just being there together, just waking up and going and getting something to eat, and just seeing all the guys. And yeah, man, I mean, yeah, you nailed it. Like, there is this part of your soul that feels restored, filling the void. you're just speaking about. And we tell people who listen, find your guys,
Find your guys. Yeah.
get together, even inquire about the reunions and stuff through Center Find America's Fund, because they pay for the flights, the venue,
Wow.
the food, everything but the alcohol. Understandable.
Well, double it right there.
So I actually got to introduce them back in September at a large event. And that's whatever I said. I said exactly that. I was telling how incredible they were. I said, so they're good stewards of your money, because they're not going to just blow money on a bunch of veterans for their alcohol. So
they've been there, done that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
there's nothing like that. And Mike, this is, a lot of people ask about the book, and rightfully so. This is, so how'd you get all these interviews? This was not done with interviews. It was capturing what could be captured every time there was an opportunity to capture it. Along at the same time, just doing a lot of study and research over the years and all that kind of stuff. But what I was trying to capture was not the X's and O's, as much as how'd you get stuff done? How did this really work? I mean, all this kind of stuff. Don Swindle was watching. Guess he was watching Band of Brothers. Yeah, he was. He called me. He was watching Band of Brothers. Yeah, I'm watching this Band of Brothers, and they're out there and they're marching up and down the line and they're yelling, telling the guys, nobody had to yell at us. We knew what we were, and so there's all this kind of stuff all the time, and this steady banter. But pay attention to that. If you're me later on, in all these conversations, there's a hint here, there's a tidbit there, and later on, when you could digitalize all this stuff, transcribe everything, and line them up, you started to see the patterns. And he just referenced that thing over there we don't have anything on, which means he was there, which means 3rd Platoon was there, which means, that kind of stuff. So paying attention to those guys, and especially with the NCOs, Sam Haddad, he and I went at it forever. He was just hammering away, chiseling away at the rocks in my head, that get control out of your head. That would not get it done on Iwo Jima. That'd get us all killed. It was not a matter of control. And so this mission leadership thing, and he never used the term, never did. Mission command, he didn't articulate things that way, but that's exactly what it was. And when you study war fighting and the, Al Gray's documents out of 89, et cetera, still with the Marine Corps, it is exactly what these guys learned and what they were hammering away at me on from Iwo Jima. So paying attention to those fine points can be very important. I drifted there. Sorry about that, but it's all about listening and paying attention to what I think are the right things, and that is they're together for a reason. What's that like? And just being with them for a while, after a while, you started to feel that, and there was a unique flavor that you could taste when you were with Fox Company and going to dinner, and when you were away, you forgot it. But when you get back with them again, there it is again. But you never would have known it otherwise, until you're together with them.
How did you link up with them the first time?
Dumb luck. The thing about it's again those principles that we talked about, leadership principles or warfighting principles, concentration of effort, and all that. I was calling when it was time to, I thought, really try to reach out to veterans and not look like a complete fool, right? So, been doing the work for years, and now it's time. Let me go start finding the guys and see if I can get a little smarter. And then you call the VFW and the American Legion in the early 90s, and they said, well, no, they don't really hang out here. What you need to do is go where they go, and that's their reunions. And they list them in the back of the magazines. Come by and I'll give you a stack of magazines. I'm like, sweet. So I go by there and holy cow, look at all these things. It was like a menu you couldn't get enough of. Well, I don't have enough money to go to all these places, fighter squadron reunions and all this. Went all over the place. And I just happened to see this one that said 2F-23, which I thought was interesting that it said that. But it said, Roy Number, Saipan, Tinny, and Iwo Jima, and having a reunion in Charleston, and the point of contacts in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Oh, home territory for me. Now this sounds, doable. So I called him up, and we had a conversation. That's how that started. Literally thumbing down through all these units, and they just happened to be one of the units that I picked and went to visit. And it was very much like a family reunion, and they welcomed me in there and spent a great deal of time. And I thought, I got to get back, and that's how that developed.
That's incredible.
Well, just dumb luck.
I wonder if they still do that list. I've never even heard of that before. The listing of the unit reunions.
What's funny is I still have all of them, but I still got the magazines with highlighted.
You have the first one still? You kept,
yeah.
The
ones they handed me, I went back with a highlighter, and I would go through and try to mark ones I thought, let's give this one a shot.
That's really cool.